Hello, welcome to this National Credit Union Administration broadcast, Financial Readiness and Fraud Prevention Resources for Service Members, Veterans, and their Families. I'm Ken Worthy, Financial Literacy Program Officer with the NCUA's Office of Consumer Financial Protection. I will be your moderator for this broadcast. Please follow along as I review the information on your screen for the best viewing experience. Adjust the volume on your computer so you can hear the webinar clearly. To increase the size of your slides, drag the bottom right corner of the presentation viewer. Please allow pop-ups from this site for it to function properly. Download a PDF of the presentation by clicking on the PDF file under the Resource widget. Use the Ask a Question feature on the left side of your console at any time in order to ask a question. We hope to address these questions at the end of the webinar, if time permits. This webinar will be closed captioned and available for on-demand viewing in the coming weeks. Before we begin, please remember that the views and opinions expressed during this broadcast are those of the presenters and do not reflect the official views of, nor should be considered an endorsement by, the National Credit Union Administration's Board of Directors, its management, or staff. Here's a rundown of what we plan to cover during this broadcast. In just a moment, NCUA's Office of Consumer Financial Protection Deputy Director, Martha Powell, will kick us off with her opening remarks on the importance of financial readiness and fraud prevention strategies for our service members, veterans, and their families. The Deputy Director will also talk about the role of credit unions, specifically military credit unions, and the role of the NCUA in supporting the financial readiness of our military community. Immediately following Deputy Director Powell, we will be joined by two leading experts on service member issues. Mr. Joshua Friedman with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office of Service Member Affairs will share data and trends related to service member financial readiness issues and highlight CFPB fraud prevention resources. We will then transition to Ms. Carol Cando-Pineda with the Federal Trade Commission's Division of Consumer and Business Education. Ms. Cando-Pineda will share some of the FTC's latest consumer protection trends related to service members, along with FTC resources. We will then open up the broadcast to take some of your questions. Again, please remember, if you have questions, submit them at any time by typing them into the Ask a Question widget on your console. And now, over to Deputy Director Martha Powell for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Ken. Welcome to all of you who are listening to this Military Consumer Month broadcast. We appreciate you taking your time out of your day to join us this afternoon. Now, the NCUA has been a partner of the Federal Trade Commission-led Military Consumer Month since its inception as the Military Consumer Protection Day in 2013. Now, the initiative has evolved into a month-long education effort that provides targeted resources for military communities on fraud prevention and other consumer financial protection issues. We at the NCUA are happy to put on this collaborative webinar with the CFPB and FTC partners, and we thank both of these agencies for joining us and sharing their expertise. As the month winds down to a close, we of course recognize that empowering military consumers is a year-long commitment. We encourage credit unions and their member owners to use the information and resources presented on this broadcast year-round to educate and help protect our service members. I do want to thank, first of all, our military community who is listening in for protecting our nation and our freedom. We honor and give thanks to the brave men and women of the armed forces, our veterans, and their families. Thank you for your commitment and service to our nation. Military life comes with a unique set of financial challenges and opportunities for service members, from training and deployment, permanent change of station, starting a family, and eventually separation from service, veteran status, and then retirement. All of these and other military life events require financial know-how, planning, and coordination. However, the demands of military life can amplify challenges associated with making very important money decisions. Additionally, service members are among the ranks of those who are considered most vulnerable to predatory lenders, identity thieves, and other fraudsters. So why do we stress financial readiness? The Department of Defense defines financial readiness as the successful management of a person's financial responsibilities to support their ability to perform wartime duties. And the financial demands of military life and being the target of fraudsters can lead to a distraction from readiness and, in the worst cases, separation from service if the issues cannot be resolved. Additionally, according to the Department of Defense, nearly 46% of active duty military members are 25 years old or less. Now, this age range is when many service members have their first experiences with the financial system, such as opening a credit union account, understanding leave and earning statements, taking out their first car loan, or getting their first credit card, and understanding the impact debt and payment history has on their credit scores. The financial decisions made by these young soldiers can have profound implications for their financial well-being later in life and even on our nation's military readiness. Now, credit unions play a major role in defending our service members, veterans, and their families against financial threats and helping them to maintain financial readiness. Hundreds of U.S. credit unions, especially the defense or military credit unions, work with military communities across the world to reinforce the importance of financial literacy education and help connect service members, veterans, and their families with financial education resources, along with the access to federally insured deposit products and services. And while credit unions serve the needs of their military members and promote financial literacy within the military communities they serve, the NCUA also works to reinforce these efforts, raise consumer awareness, and increase access to credit union services. The NCUA also participates in national financial literacy initiatives, including the Financial Literacy and Education Commission. This is an interagency group created by Congress to improve the nation's, all of American public's financial literacy and education. So I will conclude by highlighting the statement from NCUA Chairman Todd Harper. As underscored here, we must all work together to help protect our service member, veterans, and their families from financial frauds and scams. We also can work to ensure service member, veterans, and their families have access to financial education and credit union financial products and services, such as the affordable payday alternative loans under the NCUA's PAL regulation, or low or no-fee savings and checking products. As I conclude my remarks, I just want to make sure you all understand our office stands ready to help you deliver on this credit union mission of ours. We'll highlight some helpful NCUA resources later in this broadcast, and we encourage credit unions to share these freely. But in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to my office with any questions, concerns, or comments you have. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ken.
Thank you, Deputy Director Powell. Now we will hear from our expert guests, starting with Mr. Joshua Friedman, Consumer Response Specialist with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office of Service Member Affairs. If you have any questions for Josh, please type them into the Ask a Question box, and we will get to them at the end of the broadcast. Joshua?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be with all of you today. Before I begin my presentation, I do have to give a brief disclaimer that this is a presentation that's being made that I'm speaking as an individual. My views and the content that I present here may not necessarily reflect the views of the Bureau, and also the content of my presentation is not a substitute for sound legal advice, guidance, or any sort of interpretation. So you may want to consult with an attorney for more specific questions. So the Office of Service Member Affairs within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created specifically under Dodd-Frank. We have a statutory purpose. We are required to educate and empower service members and their families to help make good financial decisions. We are required to monitor consumer complaints. So we do, as most of you know, we have a complaint process where consumers can submit complaints about financial products and services, and those consumers can specifically indicate their service member status, and we do monitor complaints specifically from service members. We also do coordinate among the various federal and state agencies as well as the DoD with regard to some of these consumer financial products, specifically to help better programming and better enforcement. So to the Educate and Empower mission, and I'll just give you a brief overview, and in a couple minutes I will show you our signature product, but the Misadventures in Money Management, which we find that you can find at www.mim.gov. This is, as I said, this is our signature educational tool at this time. It's an interactive graphic comic book to help you. It's targeted towards young service members to help make good financial decisions. We have a website, of course, with a huge library of Ask CFPB questions. In the past year alone, we've gotten over 156,000 hits to our Ask questions. We also do maintain social media presence. Over 400,000 impressions have been made on our social media. When there is not a pandemic, we frequently visit bases all throughout the world, do virtual road shows to speak directly with our service members and get the word on the street and get the good news out about making better financial choices. And this slide deals. This is our MIM.gov. So one of the things that happens when you go to this slide, when you go to this tool, we have several different characters, 6 characters total, and each of them is dealing with a different financial decision. Some of them are trying to build credit, which targets the very young service members, sometimes as young as 17, 18 years old, who are off on their own for the first time and finding themselves in a situation where they have to build up their credit from nothing. You have some of our characters are trying to save up for major purchases. Some of our characters are in the process now of making major purchases, cars, homes, etc. So, and again, these are some of the scenarios that each of our characters experience: building wealth, preventing financial disasters. That's a huge focus right now, is to help young service members build up enough savings for some of these major, sudden and major expenses that come up, a major car repair, a major home repair. And this is just one of the examples. Angela is one of our characters, and she is trying to build her credit. Along the way, Angela will be, it's sort of a choose your own adventure. Angela will go into a store and have to decide between whether to pay for her her purchase with cash or with a secured credit card or with an unsecured credit card. And again, the link is mim.gov, and we also have a specific link for families of service members at mim.gov/family. So the coordination piece, this is something that is required by the Dodd-Frank Act. So the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Trade Commission, we frequently interact to make sure that service members and their families are educated to make good decisions. We do a lot of products specifically on the auto space. We do a lot of education in the student loan space. So those are some of the areas we focus on. One of the things that is, and we also coordinate with the Department of Defense. As you know, the Department of Defense has its own financial education and readiness division, and we coordinate with them to help improve their products and to help improve our products as well. And again, also the Department of Defense talks to us about some of the things that they're seeing directly from on bases from their service members. And I'll just also take a quick pause here and mention that one of the things that we've recently done is we have issued a new interpretive rule on the Military Lending Act. So as you know, the Military Lending Act is a Department of Defense regulation. So we didn't write that. The Department of Defense did. But what we have determined as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act, because an institution that is violating the Military Lending Act creates the substantial risk of harm to consumers, the CFPB has determined that that is within our authority to examine all the institutions we supervise for prospective violations of the Military Lending Act because of that substantial risk of harm if there is a violation occurring. So on our next slide, again, as I've mentioned, talking to the Department of Defense, talking to the FTC, we do share our complaint statistics with Congress. So that is something we do every year. We publish an annual report. That annual report is up on our website, and that is something that is reviewed by Congress regarding the complaints, primarily the complaint data that we have acquired in the past year that we've received from service members and their families. And that brings me to the last core function of the Office of Service Member Affairs, and that is monitoring the complaints from service members. So we received, last year alone, we received over 40,000 complaints from service members, veterans, and their families. And that is a self-reported status. So when the consumer submits a complaint, they indicate their own veteran status. We never solicit complaints, but we do put it out there that anybody who has an issue with the consumer financial product or service is always welcome to submit the complaint. Consumerfinance.gov/complaint. As you know, as most of the folks know, these complaints get routed directly to the company. And those company responses are a huge help. It helps us to see what's going on, and it helps the consumer. So we love to say that that company will, you'll get the response within 15 days, or at least in 15 days, the company will respond if they need extra time. The consumer must consent for us to publish that complaint. So that complaint will not be made public without the consumer's consent, and of course we always scrub out the personally identifiable information. And we give the consumer an opportunity to provide feedback if they don't like the response they've received from the company. So again, some of the uses for our complaint data, we use that complaint data to improve our educational products. We use that complaint data to assist in the supervision of companies. So when we see a systemic pattern, repeated, the same issue repeatedly coming up about the same company, that's something that we would forward over to the Supervision and Enforcement Division, and that assists with the examination process or even possibly taking an enforcement action. And of course, we share that data with other government agencies, including the DoD, and the best example of that would be violations of the Service Member Civil Relief Act, because ultimately the SCRA is enforced by the Department of Justice. So when we see SCRA violations, we would forward those over to the Department of Justice. So one of the things that we've been definitely very engaged in trying to lean forward as we get through this pandemic and some of the nuances, the financial nuances that have come about as a result of the pandemic. What we've been hearing from people is that COVID has brought out the best in some people and the worst in others. So we have this hub here for critical, all the up-to-date content, the latest and greatest, everything we know about some of the financial resources that are available to service members and even the general public because of the pandemic, whether it is getting forbearances for your mortgage or reaching out to some of the various service organizations that provide financial assistance and counseling to service members. We want to make sure that service members have all that information at their fingertips by going to our website. And again, some of the content we put out there, a lot of it's educational, just how to letting folks know how to protect themselves, knowing their rights when they get a phone call from a prospective scam artist, knowing their rights when debt collectors are calling, how to protect their credit, what are some of the relief options, how is your credit affected by applying for some of the various relief actions, and just helping to ease that impact that comes with, in some cases, some of the financial hardships. And with that, that's all I had, and I'll certainly be happy to take your questions at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Really appreciate all that great information you shared from the CFPB. Now we will go ahead and transition over to Ms. Carol Cando-Pineda with the Federal Trade Commission's Division of Consumer and Business Education. If you have questions for Carol, please, or Josh, please type them into the Ask a Question box, and we'll get to them at the end of the broadcast. Carol, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ken. And thank you to NCUA and to my fellow speakers and to all of you for giving us your time and attention this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about broad outlines and overview of scams and tell you some of the current pitches and come-ons that we're seeing that are scam-related, and what are the red flags. You know, we know those stories change, but what are the red flags that are going to give you a tip-off that you're dealing with a scammer? So let me talk initially about why we think service members could be more targeted for scams. They get a regular paycheck. Military families are moving quite a bit, probably more than most civilian families. So your information is getting passed around more. You're breaking down one household and creating another household, more opportunities to buy things and to be out in the marketplace. And, you know, we know that that scammers are just going to take advantage wherever they can. They're going to take advantage in gaps in knowledge. So if there's some big issue happening out in the world and we're not exactly sure what's going on, or it's a fast developing situation, scammers are going to jump on that. And so we've certainly seen that with COVID. There are lots of different impersonation scams that arose when we were in the early stages of the pandemic. So we're not seeing so much of those kinds of scams, but they've evolved to other kinds of things. So what do I mean when I talk about an impersonation scam? We see an awful lot of fraud happening now with impersonation. So that just means the scammer is pretending to be somebody that you know or trust, whether it's a legitimate business, legitimate government agency, or family and friends. The stories take all different kinds of twists and turns, and they're all different flavors of impersonation scams out there. But the bottom line is they're just trying to gain your trust to get you to send them money and or your personal information. So one that has been around for a long time involves scammers pretending to be from government agencies, whether they say they're from the SSA and there's a problem with your Social Security number that they can miraculously fix for you if you pay them, or if they're from the IRS and you owe a frightening amount of back taxes and they've been trying to contact you, but you can suffer all kinds of difficulties on your tax return and your tax files. But if you pay them, they'll help you clean it up and they'll help you get that situation settled, and they try to make you panic into acting right away. So a twist on that we saw during COVID was when the IRS was distributing stimulus money, economic payments to families during COVID to help people get through that initial economic shock when everything shut down. And so now, under the American Rescue Act, eligible families will be getting monthly payments through the end of the year. And I think those payments have already started to go out. And so scammers may call you, text you, email you, and say that they're from the IRS and they've been trying to track you down to send you your money. If you just send them a fee or you confirm all your personal information, they'll be able to send you your payment. They'll get you your payment earlier. They'll help you track something down. That doesn't happen. The IRS is not going to call you and ask for personal information or to ask you to pay them to get that payment. If you get one of those, that's a scam. We're also starting to see vaccine verification scams. So anybody that contacts you and says they're from the federal government and that they need your information or they need you to pay to get some sort of verification that you've been vaccinated, that's very likely a scam. That is not happening. And so you just want to, have your spidey senses up to be aware that that's just not how these things happen, and you're not going to get a call asking for money to get verification for your vaccine. Over the course of last year, we saw online romance scams skyrocket. More than $300 million were lost to these kinds of scams because we were all doing everything online, and it just gave the scammers more opportunities. So really, the bottom line is if you're interacting with someone, even if it's been for a couple of weeks, but you've never met them in real life, if they start to ask you for money, chances are it's a scam. You want to cut off contact. You don't want to be interacting with somebody on an online dating site or somebody that you've met on an online dating site that wants you to text privately. If they start to ask you for money, that's a scam. So I raise this because I think my suspicion is, that, and I don't have a lot to back this up, but my suspicion is that a lot of young service members are not using checks to pay for things. Maybe some are, but many younger people aren't familiar with how checks work. And so the scammer may pretend to hire you and say, well, we'll pay you in advance for your first 2 weeks as a good faith sign, and then they send you a check, that for a whopping amount of money, and they say, oh, we accidentally sent you too much. Could you please wire back $1,000? Could you wire back $500? And people will deposit the check, and they'll say, well, the money's in my account. I guess this is legitimate. That sort of proves that this person is legitimate, and then they wire the money back. As soon as you wire the money back, it's gone. And what people don't realize is it takes a little while for the bank or credit union to realize that a check is not legitimate and that there are no funds to back it up. And so anything that the person has wired to who they think is their employer but who is a scammer is gone if they've either wired their own money or they owe the bank to reimburse the bank for the money that was wired out. So if somebody sends you a check and they ask you to wire money back, don't do it. It's a scam. So just to reiterate, some of the signs of those scams is if anybody asks you to pay by wiring money, if you haven't met them in person, don't. Typically, you can't get your money back. If somebody wants you to pay with a gift card, don't. Gift cards are meant for gifts. They're not meant for payments. And so if somebody's asking you to pay and they're creating this emergency story and they want you to pay with a gift card, don't. We know that those are scams. If somebody asks you to pay with digital money or cryptocurrency, you want to think twice about that because we're starting to see a rise in scammers realizing they can get payment. It's not traceable. That's the point of cryptocurrency. It's kind of an independent thing without a lot of government protections. So you really want to think twice about that because it's another opportunity for scammers to just get your money and very little recourse for you to get it back. We do have an article, if you were scammed. I know the URL is very small there, but we could probably put it into the chat if people are interested to get it. You could go on to consumer.ftc.gov and just type in if you were scammed, and the article comes up. And it tells you the different steps you can go through if you lost money to a scammer by paying with a gift card, if you wired money, the kinds of things that you can do to try to get the money back. And then, so there we go. There are some of the steps there. So if it's your credit or your debit card, you would call your bank or your credit union and tell them there was a fraudulent charge. Same thing with the gift card. We also have an article on gift cards that gives you the customer service numbers of some of the most popular gift card companies, and you could call them and tell them that you were scammed and ask for them to return the value, a refund for the value of the gift card. The same thing with wiring money. You can tell the company the wire transfer company that it was a fraudulent transfer and try to get your money back. It may not work. You have the most success if you can do it immediately. As soon as you realize you were scammed and the closer to the transaction, the more likely you may be able to get some help or some relief. But it's always worth it to call and try to go through that process because the companies need to know if there are fraudulent charges being made, using their systems. And, if you're a customer, it's your right to try to get good service. So you want to try to at least follow up on that and see if you can get some of your money back. So if you do encounter scams, we would love to hear about it. You go to reportfraud.ftc.gov. It helps us see how scams are evolving, how the stories change, how the payment methods change, how scammers may see an opening, say, for instance, with cryptocurrency, or with sometimes with mobile payment apps like Venmo or Zelle or things like that. You may get an unsolicited email or text from somebody that says you owe them money, and you could just shoot it to their Venmo. And if you get something like that, it's not expected, and you're not sure exactly who it's from, you don't want to click on anything on that text. You don't want to really open it up. But log into your account on that payment app and see if there are any requests there, and try to track it down and verify that it's legitimate. And so we don't know that. We see what's going on in the market, and we try to monitor those things. But one of the best sources of information for us is the reports that we get from you all to tell us how you're experiencing scams and fraud in the marketplace. It doesn't matter if you've lost money to it or if a client has lost money. If you've spotted it, we really would like to hear about it. Currently, we get about 120,000 complaints from service members, veterans, and their families over the course of a year. And, the more we get, the more robust that data is, and the easier it is for us to try to track trends and see what's happening. One more site I wanted to mention to you is identitytheft.gov. So if you suspect that your information is being misused, compromised in some way, or there are unauthorized charges on an account or being reported on your credit report, then go to identitytheft.gov. It's the FTC's one-stop place to develop your recovery plan for identity theft. So once you put your information in, you get a customizable recovery list. It'll tell you exactly what your plan is, who you need to contact, what you need to provide, sort of the timetable to do that. And then it'll get you reminders as well. So you don't need to set up an account, but if you do, and obviously this is, it's free and it's secure. If you do, then you can go back and update your report as you learn more about the identity theft. And that can be really helpful because over time it may change a little bit, or you may find other instances of unauthorized charges or different forms of identity theft that have happened, and you need to notify other parties. So once you put all your information into the system, before you print it out or save it as a PDF, once you do that, it prints out as a final document as an identity theft report. So it won't say FTC complaint or complaint to the FTC. It'll say identity theft report up at the top of it. And why that's important is that an identity theft report it's a term of art under the federal statute, and it's an actual legal document so that it confers rights on you as an identity theft victim. So in one of those is that it helps you get information off of your credit reports in a more permanent way. You have a little bit of something to back you up. The identitytheft.gov will also allow you to populate sample letters. So you can, once you put that information in, that you can get a letter that has got all of your details in it, along with your identity theft report with all the details of the identity theft incident. You put them together, and that's what you can send to the credit reporting company to let them know that there are unauthorized charges. You can send it to the company where you suspect the identity theft occurred to let them know that you didn't buy that thing or the charge is unauthorized with them, that it's a fraudulent charge, and ask them to take it off to whatever companies you need to notify that you're a victim of identity theft. They may come back and say that you need to provide additional information or to fill out one of their forms. They may request that you get a police report. Generally, if you suspect identity theft, there are a handful of things that you need to do right away. You need to contact that company where you suspect it existed. You need to let the credit reporting companies know. You need to get copies of your credit reports so that you can make sure there aren't any other unauthorized charges that you weren't aware of. And then you want to report it to the FTC and go to identitytheft.gov to report it. and to get all that documentation together that'll help you follow up with the credit reporting company and the other companies. And then you might need to get a police report. And that identity theft report is going to make it easier for you to get that police report. It puts all the information together. It takes some of the burden off with the police department. And they're more likely to put a cover sheet on the report, give you your police report number, which is what you then need to turn around and provide to certain other companies. Excuse me. So it just makes the process a little bit more efficient for you. And so finally, we'd love if you stay connected with militaryconsumer.gov, the FTC's military consumer program. We put out scam alerts, blog posts. If you'd like to sign up to get them automatically in your email box, go to militaryconsumer.gov and click on email updates. You put in your email address and that'll sign you up. And if you ever decide that you don't want to get the updates anymore, you can easily just go back and get your email address removed. We're also pretty active on Facebook and Twitter, particularly during certain times of the year, like Military Consumer Month, or maybe November for Veterans Day and that whole month. During April for Financial Literacy Month, there's always a lot of conversations, not just between FTC, DOD, and CFPB, but also some of our other federal and state partners offer their resources, and we'll talk about sort of the latest scams that are out there and the latest information to help service members and military families to manage their money, to manage their finances. And that concludes my official remarks, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. I'll turn it back to Ken.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol. Great information from the FTC. If you have any questions for Carol, Josh, or myself, please ask them now. Put them in the Ask a Question on the console and type them in, and we'll get to them towards the end of this broadcast. I see some coming in now. Great. Keep typing your questions in. Before we get to your questions, I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of the Office of Consumer Financial Protection's financial literacy resources. The NCUA's Office of Consumer Financial Protection provides support to our military community in many ways. The office is responsible for enforcing federal consumer financial protection laws and regulations and conducting fair lending examinations, where we also offer resources to the military community that can be used to help service members, veterans, and their families make financial decisions. Our primary resource is our mycreditunion.gov website. We provide information, resources on this site on financial literacy and consumer financial protection issues. So if you haven't visited mycreditunion.gov, we encourage you to do so. The site is also available in Spanish at espanol.mycreditunion.gov. Credit unions and consumers use the information and learning tools on mycreditunion.gov to provide education with helpful tips on topics such as debt management, steps to purchasing a vehicle, credit reports and scores, as well as how to save. And a reminder to presenters, please make sure you mute your lines. In addition to providing helpful information for active duty service members, mycreditunion.gov has specific material for families of service members and veterans. For example, you can find links and information on how to work with personal financial management services on installations. There are also links to information about the GI benefit information, blended retirement systems, TSP, and others. So I encourage you, credit unions, to go look at these resources, and consumers that are listening in to certainly access these resources on mycreditunion.gov. In fact, many of the resources I'm discussing and presenting also include CFPB and FTC resources that were discussed today. Also on mycreditunion.gov, you can find the NCUA Consumer Assistance Center. We provide the NCUA Consumer Assistance Center to help answer questions and other inquiries from the public about consumer financial protection rights, or how consumers can work with a credit union to resolve a pending issue. We also have a find and answer feature on the site that allows consumers to type in a question and get an answer to frequently asked questions on topics such as how to become a credit union member, calculating fees and interest on loans, as well as information on different deposit and loan products that credit unions offer. One of our most popular features on mycreditunion.gov is the What is a Credit Union information graphic. This tool helps explain the difference between banks and credit unions, detailing how credit unions are not-for-profit member-owned cooperatives, and also it outlines important field of membership information that is relevant specifically to defense and military credit unions. We have some interactive learning tools for young people on our mycreditunion.gov website that might help families teach important financial lessons at home. We have a financial adventure game for ages 10 through 15 called Hit the Road. It's a throwback to the Oregon Trail type gameplay. Maybe some of you are familiar with the Oregon Trail still. Hit the Road takes users on a virtual road trip across the country, but the journey's not easy. They must all save and spend money wisely and complete challenges along the way. They also get a scorecard at the end that lets them know how well they saved and spent their money. So great tool for young people. We also have World of Sense, which is a fun and engaging kid-friendly game for ages 5 and up. Users choose a character to participate in a world that the user can build out. That's their own little world that they can build out. Users select one of 3 levels to challenge their math and matching skills. They also switch between building the world and a coin matching game to earn money. Then they decide how to spend the money through what buildings they want to use in their own virtual world. And they can make little enhancements to their buildings and decide to spend money, but then the maintenance costs go up, so it's a great way to teach how to save and spend wisely. It's available in a web-based version on mycreditunion.gov, and it's also available in the Apple Store. So you can download it on your smartphone or your Apple device. Finally, I'll wrap up with a reminder about the 2 very important federal consumer financial protection laws that exist to protect service members. First, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, also known as SCRA, is a federal law designed to ease financial burdens on service members and their dependents during periods of military service. The SCRA provides protections for debts entered into before the start of active duty service. Also, the Military Lending Act, also known as MLA, is a federal law designed to protect active duty military personnel, including those in the active National Guard or Reserve, as well as their spouses and dependents who enter into consumer credit transactions after active duty begins. Your credit union can help consumers understand these protections by using the information on mycreditunion.gov. Now we'll go ahead and transition to answering some of your questions. Again, if you have any, type them in the Ask a Question feature on the console, and we'll get to them during this segment. We'll start off with our first question. First question is to Josh. Josh, you indicated that the CFPB offers seminars for military installations. How can credit unions work with you at the CFPB to request a seminar or request a presentation? How would they go about getting that process started?
So thank you for that question. That's a great question. So the first step would probably be to speak with the base PFM. So every DoD installation has a base personal finance manager. That would be the first person to speak with regarding getting us on the base. And then eventually, and you can also email us directly at military@cfpb.gov. And what ends up happening is all of our DoD visits, when those start up again, and of course we certainly can do virtual. Virtual is very easy to accomplish, but to do in person, that all gets coordinated through through the DoD Office of Financial Education and Readiness at the Pentagon, and that's Mr. Andy Cohen, for those who are familiar with him. He is a great resource, but he is great and coordinates CFPB coming onto a military base for a presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And Carol, we'll bring you in on that one as well. How can credit unions use FTC resources to work with their PFMs on installations? Are there any additional resources, or is there a way that you recommend best practice for credit unions to do such?
Well, I would always send credit unions to consumer.ftc.gov, and that way you can get a look at the whole portfolio of articles, videos, and other materials that we have. If you have a question, you might be able to answer it very quickly looking at that. We're always, we don't have as big a staff and the budget to be able to travel so much, but we're always able to do virtual presentations, whether it's for the staff for one credit union, for an entire system of credit unions, or for all kinds of people that are working on an installation that are counseling service members. So that's always something to consider, and you could reach out to me for that, and we could see if we could arrange something.
Absolutely, and there are opportunities for the NCUA to also work with credit unions and provide financial literacy and consumer financial protection information. So feel free to reach out to our office, and we'll provide that information at the end of this broadcast, and we can reach out to the FTC and CFPB on your behalf, and we can all work together, or you can certainly reach out to us individually as well as agencies. Another question regarding how to work with service members on installations. Are there any best practices on how to connect with PFMs?
The best bet, if you have a question about a specific base, your best bet would be just to contact, just email us directly at military@cfpb.gov, and we will try and find. I think we usually know, we keep a list of most of the PFMs. So if you reach out to us, we can connect you with that base PFM.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And a question now over to you, Carol. Is the identitytheft.gov site a secure site?
Yes, it is a secure site. It definitely is. It's also available in Spanish if a client would prefer to send their information in Spanish, and there's an online chat support help function.
And Carol, there's a question attached to identitytheft.gov in terms of the steps to reporting identity theft. Can you talk a little bit more about those steps? And I believe you mentioned, there's an opportunity to contact law enforcement and report to credit bureaus. Do you mind just briefly going over that again?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So if you suspect identity theft, there are a handful of things that you need to do immediately. You need to contact the company where you suspect identity theft happened, right? Where there's some sort of an unauthorized charge. That might be a retailer, it might be your utility company. Wherever you think there's a false charge, you need to call that company right away. And you'll have to follow up in writing and perhaps fill out some forms, but first just call them and get that started. Then you want to call the credit reporting companies. They all have different methods. You may have to go online and report it that way, but you could also call them and try to get that started to let them know that there are unauthorized charges on your credit report. Then you want to order your credit reports and look at them really carefully to make sure that there aren't other charges on there that you need to be contesting and disputing. So you want to go to identitytheft.gov, which is reporting it to the FTC, but more importantly, it's giving you the sample letters and that identity theft report so that you can then follow up with the company and with the credit report in writing. Sometimes a company or some organization where you're reporting the identity theft may require you to have a police report as well, because identity theft is a crime. And so that would require you to go to your local police and try to get that police report. Sometimes police are a little bit hesitant to give you that police report because, we don't know where it happened. If you, most of the time you don't know how the identity theft happened. And so, their position will be, well, if it didn't happen in this jurisdiction, I don't know that if I can give you that report. But there's a memorandum to police departments on identitytheft.gov that tells you exactly what you can say and what you can give it to the police, and it explains to them why that police report is so important to you, the victim, and why it's necessary to get that police report. And the identity theft report makes it much easier for them. It makes it a much lighter lift, and then they can give you, a lot of the times the police will take that identity theft report, put a cover sheet over it with their police department cover sheet, and give you a number so that it shows that you filed a police report, and now you have your copy to take back with you to then show people that you filed a police report. So hopefully the memorandum and the comprehensiveness of the identity theft report is enough to get you your police report.
And Carol, another follow-up question to you regarding how consumers can report fraud to the FTC. Could you also just briefly go over that process again?
Certainly. If you encounter a scam, whether or not you've lost money or you've just spotted something that seems like a scam, go to reportfraud.ftc.gov. And it's a very intuitive process. It walks you through and asks you different questions and brings you to the next screen and sort of pulls you through to the end, similar to the identitytheft.gov site.
Thank you, Carol. And a general question regarding the availability of your resources from the FTC and the CFPB. Is there a charge to use these resources, and can credit unions link to the resources on their own websites?
So for the FTC, there is no charge for any of the materials, whether you want to download them, whether you just want to read them on site, or whether you want to order print copies. We don't have everything available in a print copy, but if you're interested in ordering, 50 or more copies, I think it's maybe 25 is maybe the minimum, but you can get on and look. That site is ftc.gov/bulk order, BULKORDER, ftc.gov/bulk order, and you can order print copies of a lot of our materials there. You can hand them out. You can use them in your newsletters. You can take out parts of them and use them in newsletters, use them in your social media. It's all free and it's all freely available. You don't need any kind of copyright permission ahead of time to use them.
Josh, and did you want to talk about CFPB resources, whether there is any charge, and can credit unions link to your resources?
Yeah, certainly. So we have, our website is consumerfinance.gov/service members. We have, if you go to the service member page on the CFPB's website, you've got links to all our annual reports, all of our blog posts, and we link to a variety of other resources about how to protect yourself, knowing your SCRA rights, knowing your MLA rights, and also knowing how to protect yourself from frauds and scams. And we link to the FTC also for a lot of their content as well.
Yeah, and let me just add, I'm sorry, Ken. I just wanted to add that folks could also link to the materials from their own websites if they wanted to. I just wanted to mention that. And that we also have a whole suite of videos on a variety of different issues that can be really good to use on your social media or on your website. Sometimes they illustrate, some of these financial management or anti-scam issues really nicely. And that's at consumer.ftc.gov.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol and Josh. And on behalf of NCUA, our resources are absolutely free of charge and on mycreditunion.gov for your use as you see fit to outreach to your members. Link to our resources, link to our games, our articles, our brochures. We also have videos available on mycreditunion.gov on a lot of important topics. So feel free to use our resources as well. And again, as Josh has mentioned and Carol has mentioned, all of our resources cross-promote and link to each other. A question about financial accounts. Do you have any resources on how consumers can protect their sort of financial identity or their financial account information? Any tips or practices, maybe a blog post of some kind? Carol, maybe start with you.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest is we want to get the clients in the practice, make it a habit to check their accounts all the time, that they should have some idea of the charges that should appear on their credit account or, when they took money out with a debit account. We know, especially with service members, they're experiencing identity theft at much higher rates than the civilian population, particularly when it comes to unauthorized withdrawals, probably using a debit card. And so people really want to check those accounts on a regular basis, just the way they should be checking their credit report on a regular basis. And I would also say whether it's on their regular mobile banking app, if they're banking using an app, or whether it's through mobile payment apps like Venmo or Zelle, they should add multi-factor authentication if it's added, if it's offered. I know not every banking app is going to offer that, but if it's there, they should add that because it's just that extra layer of security. For those that, if there are clients on here that maybe aren't familiar, multi-factor authentication is really your password with something else like a code generated from a token or a code that's texted to you or your fingerprint, something that makes it a little bit harder for a scammer or a dishonest person to take advantage of your account and break in.
Excellent information. Thank you, Carol. Another tip is if your credit union offers the ability to set up account alerts, for a certain threshold for withdrawals or for transactions using the debit card or check card, that's a great way to also detect unusual activity, account activity. So we encourage you to educate your members about the features for your online banking or mobile banking platforms. Those are great resources, especially for young people who are just learning about how to manage their money.
Yeah, and let's not forget that service members are eligible for free electronic credit monitoring as well, which could really help them.
Oh, that's excellent, Carol. And there's additional information on FTC with that information?
Yes, I believe it's on identitytheft.gov where you can find more information about that. But if they go to the sites for Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, they should be able to find out about, there should be a military section on each of those sites, and it will help you set up free electronic credit monitoring.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Carol, and thank you, Josh, for your expertise. We really appreciate you joining us and helping us gather thoughts on how to protect service members, veterans, and their families. Thank you again for coming. And now with that concludes our question and answer section of this broadcast. I'll hand it back over to Deputy Director Martha Powell for our closing remarks.
Thank you, Ken. Once again, I do want to thank all of you watching or listening in on this, and a special thanks again to Carol and Josh for sharing your insights with us. We hope everyone who tuned in found this information helpful. Once this webinar is available for on-demand viewing, we encourage you to share it with your members or other members of the community as an education resource. Please contact us at any time, the Office of Consumer Financial Protection at the NCUA, if you have additional questions, comments, or concerns. And also be sure to visit mycreditunion.gov to access many financial literacy and consumer financial protection resources, in addition to all those that you've heard about today. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ken.
Thank you, Deputy Director. This webinar will be closed captioned and available for on-demand viewing on ncua.gov and mycreditunion.gov in the coming weeks. Thank you for tuning in. This concludes our broadcast.